The world, in its earliest days, existed in a profound and mysterious darkness. A time long before the birth of written language, civilization, or even the first understanding of time as we know it. Humanity's ancestors lived in this eternal twilight, surrounded by primal forces beyond their comprehension. But even in this profound obscurity, they found a sense of awe, a deep, trembling awareness of something greater than themselves. To these early humans, the sun was not just a celestial body, but a divine force, a life-giving presence that held the power to shape their world, their future, and their very existence. For thousands of years, before the first flickers of civilization, early humans were shaped by the ebb and flow of light and darkness. They woke with the sunrise, hunted and gathered in its warmth, and sought shelter in the shadows as nightfall descended. But it was the absence of light, the darkness, that gave rise to humanity's most profound fears and existential questions. The night was not merely the absence of the sun, it was a space filled with uncertainty, danger, and the unknown. The darkness, with its vast emptiness, was a place where the invisible ruled. It was where creatures roamed that were feared for their unpredictability, their unseen movements, their hidden intentions. For early humans, the night was not only a time of physical vulnerability but of psychological vulnerability as well. There was no light to guide them, no certainty, no knowledge of what lay beyond the veil. In a world ruled by the relentless forces of nature, the dark hours represented a period of great potential, both for discovery and for danger. Yet, within this darkness, there was also a profound yearning. As the stars began to shimmer faintly against the black backdrop of the sky, early humans gazed upward in awe, their eyes tracing the paths of the moon, the stars, and eventually, the sun. They saw the light as something sacred, a presence that could not be contained or understood fully, but whose effects were undeniable. The sun, for them, was not simply an astronomical body, it was life itself. It represented hope, renewal, and a constant promise that life, though fleeting, would continue in cycles of growth and decay. In this ancient world of darkness, myths began to form. Legends were birthed to explain the unexplainable, to bring some semblance of understanding to a universe that, on the surface, seemed capricious and chaotic. One such myth that grew out of the primordial darkness was the tale of the solar child, a figure born from the very shadow of night itself, destined to bring light, warmth, and hope to the world. The solar child myth is one of the oldest and most universal myths in human history. It appears across cultures, each iteration reflecting the specific fears, hopes, and dreams of the people who told them. In its earliest form, the solar child represented the potential for light to emerge from the chaos of the night. The child was often portrayed as vulnerable, sometimes a literal infant or young hero, whose power was not fully realized but whose future was filled with promise. The darkness was both a womb and a crucible, a place where the solar child could grow, develop, and prepare to rise against the overwhelming forces of shadow. But this figure wasn't merely a symbol of divine light. The solar child embodied something far deeper, humanity's own struggle with darkness, both in the world around them and within themselves. The child's journey was a reflection of the human condition, the constant battle between light and dark, ignorance and knowledge, life and death. As the solar child grew in myth, so too did humanity's understanding of the cosmos, their place within it, and the cycle of life that they were bound to. There is something inherently powerful about the idea of the solar child. In the depths of night, when survival was uncertain, and the world seemed fraught with danger, the solar child stood as a beacon. The sun, rising on the horizon, promised warmth, food, safety, and above all, hope. The myth of the solar child wasn't just a story to explain the rising of the sun, it was a way of explaining the human experience itself. The birth of light from darkness symbolized the hope that, no matter how deep the shadows grew, there was always the potential for transformation, for renewal. For early humans, the sun was not only a source of physical survival, but a profound spiritual force. They recognized the solar cycles as both a reflection of nature's rhythms and a mirror of their own life cycles. The sun, in its daily journey across the sky, was a metaphor for birth, growth, death, and rebirth, a cycle that each human would eventually follow. To see the sun rise every morning was a reminder that life itself was a precious, fleeting gift, but one that was eternal in its renewal. This myth of the solar child wasn't just an intellectual explanation of celestial events, it was a deeply emotional and spiritual framework through which early humans made sense of their world. In the solar child, they saw themselves, vulnerable, striving, and full of potential, yet inevitably bound to the darkness. The child's rise, just as the sun's ascent, symbolized the victory of life over death, light over darkness, order over chaos. It was an eternal battle, one that played out in the stars above and in the hearts of those who told the story. And yet, even as the sun rose each day, the darkness did not disappear. The night would return, as it always did, and with it would come the same fears and uncertainties. But the story of the solar child taught humanity an essential truth, that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, there is always the possibility of light. The solar child myth became a symbol of hope that transcended time, space, and culture, a reminder that the cycles of life, no matter how dark or uncertain, always held the promise of renewal and rebirth. In the silence of the night, when the world seemed impossibly large and filled with unexplainable forces, early humans found solace in the idea of the solar child. The child became the ultimate hero, not just of the myth, but of the human condition itself. Through the child, humanity saw its own potential for greatness. Just as the child emerged from the darkness, so too could they rise from the challenges they faced in their own lives. The child's struggle against the night was not merely a cosmic battle, it was a reflection of the internal battles that each person must face in their own journey. And so, through myth and story, through the rising and setting of the sun, humanity began to find meaning in the world around them. The myth of the solar child grew and evolved, but its core message remained the same, that light, though fleeting, was always worth seeking, and that in every darkness, there is the potential for new beginnings. This ancient myth, born from the darkest hours of humanity's existence, would go on to shape cultures, philosophies, and religions for millennia, leaving a legacy that continues to influence us today. In the earliest days of human existence, before civilizations and written languages, the world was shrouded in a profound darkness. This was a time when humanity was still in its infancy, and the vastness of the world was an overwhelming and mysterious force. Life itself was driven by survival, but survival was constantly at the mercy of nature's unpredictable cycles. The sun, which today seems like a mundane part of our daily existence, was then a celestial enigma, an all-powerful force that governed life and death, growth and decay, warmth and cold. For the earliest humans, the darkness was not merely the absence of light but a palpable presence, an entity filled with both danger and mystery. The nights were long, cold, and uncertain. Without the safety and comforts of fire and shelter, the darkness was a realm where predators roamed, and unknown dangers lurked. It was a time of vulnerability, where every rustle in the shadows could signal a threat. There was no protection from the elements, no technological advancements, and no understanding of the forces that controlled the world. The absence of the sun was not just an inconvenience, it was a constant reminder of the fragility of life. As early humans huddled around campfires, they found themselves facing the abyss of night. The sky above, once a limitless expanse, seemed impenetrable. It was in this vast, uncharted darkness that the first stirrings of spirituality and myth emerged. Early humans, unable to comprehend the forces shaping their world, turned to stories, rituals, and beliefs to make sense of the uncertainty they faced. They looked to the stars, the moon, and the cyclical patterns of the world around them to explain the inexplicable. The rising and setting of the sun became one of the most fundamental mysteries in their lives. Each morning, the sun would rise, piercing the night with its golden light, bringing warmth, safety, and the promise of another day. And yet, each evening, as the sun sank beneath the horizon, it seemed to carry with it all the light, warmth, and hope that had defined the day. The cyclical nature of the sun's journey was both reassuring and terrifying. It was a constant, reliable pattern, yet one that left humanity in awe of the unknown that lurked beyond the night. The sun, with its power to transform the world, became more than just a physical phenomenon. It became a divine force, a symbol of life, creation, and hope. It was the sun that nourished the earth, caused crops to grow, and allowed animals to thrive. Without the sun, life would not exist. It was the light that banished the darkness, and its return each morning was a sign of life's persistence, of the world's continuing rhythm. To early humans, the sun was not just a star, it was a god, a force beyond their understanding but essential to their survival. But as much as the sun represented life, its absence also represented death. When the sun set, the world fell into shadow, and with the darkness came the fear of what could not be seen or understood. The unknown became synonymous with danger, with death. The night was a time when everything seemed to change, when the familiar gave way to the mysterious and the dangerous. In the darkness, everything that was once certain became uncertain. The sun's disappearance each evening created a profound sense of loss, a feeling of abandonment by the very force that had given life and sustenance throughout the day. It was within this profound tension, between light and dark, life and death, that the myth of the solar child began to take form. The solar child was a figure born from the darkness, one who was destined to bring light back to the world. In some cultures, the solar child was an infant, born in the deepest night, whose eventual rise would mark the return of the sun. This child, though vulnerable, held the promise of transformation, renewal, and salvation. The solar child became a symbol not just of the sun's return but of the hope that each day brings. It was a figure of purity, innocence, and potential, a being whose birth was a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is always the potential for rebirth. The solar child was not just a character in a story. It was a representation of humanity's deepest longing for order and meaning in a world that seemed chaotic and unyielding. The myth of the solar child reflects the human experience, the struggle to make sense of the cycles of life and death, of growth and decay. The child, born from the night, represents the potential for light to emerge from darkness, for hope to rise from despair, and for life to continue despite the inevitable presence of death. In many cultures, the solar child was not a solitary figure but one surrounded by forces of darkness that sought to keep the light from returning. These forces represented the primal fears that early humans grappled with, the fear of the unknown, the fear of death, and the fear of chaos. The solar child, then, was a symbol of the battle between light and dark, of the eternal struggle between hope and despair. Its rise signified the triumph of light over darkness, of order over chaos, of life over death. The solar child myth, while ancient, speaks to a deep and timeless truth, that in the face of darkness, there is always the potential for light. This myth became a way for early humans to cope with their fears, to explain the unexplainable, and to find hope in the face of uncertainty. It was a reflection of their own struggle for survival, a reminder that no matter how dark the night, the sun would rise again. And when it did, it would bring with it the promise of a new day, of a fresh start, and of the endless possibility for renewal. As humans began to form communities, build civilizations, and develop more complex societies, the myth of the solar child continued to evolve. In some cultures, the solar child became a divine hero, a figure of immense power whose rise was not just a physical event but a spiritual one. The child's journey was one of growth, transformation, and ultimately, enlightenment. The solar child, in many ways, mirrored humanity's own journey, from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, from the chaos of primal fears to the order of understanding. The solar child became a universal archetype, one that transcended cultural boundaries and spoke to a shared human experience. The light of the sun became a symbol not just of physical survival, but of spiritual awakening, of the quest for meaning, and of the human desire to overcome darkness, both literal and metaphorical. Whether in the form of gods, heroes, or divine beings, the solar child embodied humanity's most fundamental beliefs about the nature of existence, that light, in all its forms, is worth seeking, that life is fragile but resilient, and that the darkness, no matter how overwhelming, can always be overcome. In this way, the myth of the solar child continues to resonate with us today. The sun, even in our modern world, remains a symbol of life, hope, and renewal. We still seek the light, both in the natural world and in our inner lives, and we continue to tell stories about the power of the sun to heal, transform, and sustain us. The myth that emerged from the darkness of ancient times is not just a relic of the past, it is a living, breathing part of our collective consciousness, a reminder that no matter how dark the world may seem, there is always the possibility of light. As early humans began to emerge from the primordial darkness and into the light, something profound began to stir within their consciousness. It was no longer enough to simply survive from one day to the next, driven by instinct alone. The human mind, in its early stages of development, began to awaken to the world around it. This awakening, however, was not a singular event, nor was it sudden. It unfolded slowly, over millennia, as humans began to perceive not just the immediate forces of nature but the deeper patterns that governed their existence. They began to notice the cycles of the moon, the regularity of the seasons, and the rising and setting of the sun, a rhythm that seemed to guide life itself. It was here, at this juncture between survival and understanding, that human consciousness began to evolve into something more complex, something capable of abstract thought, self-reflection, and an ever-expanding desire to understand the mysteries of the universe. The dawn of consciousness in early humans was a slow, uneven process. In the beginning, humans lived in a world where their survival was defined by immediate needs: food, shelter, and safety. These were the concerns that dominated daily life. There was little room for contemplation or philosophy. Yet, as humans began to use tools, communicate with each other, and form social bonds, the foundations for a more complex way of thinking were laid. The simplest tools, like a sharpened rock or a hand-carved spear, represented a leap in understanding. They were not merely functional objects, they were tools that symbolized a new way of thinking. Humans were no longer passive in their environment. They could shape it, alter it, and make it serve their needs. Alongside this increasing mastery over the environment came a growing awareness of the self. Early humans, like other animals, were undoubtedly aware of their own existence, of hunger, of pain, and of the need to reproduce. But the human mind began to question not only what they were, but why they were. Why did the sun rise every morning and set every evening? What caused the seasons to change? What was the meaning of life, death, and the world that surrounded them? These questions could not be answered through immediate observation or sensory experience alone. They required a new kind of thinking, abstract thought. The human mind began to conceptualize ideas beyond the tangible, to form connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena, and to imagine forces that could not be directly seen or felt. At first, the answers to these questions were not intellectual, but mythological. The sun, for example, could not simply be understood as a fiery ball of gas at the center of the solar system, it had to be something more. It had to be a force, a god, a spirit with purpose and intention. Early humans looked up at the sky, and in the sun, they saw not just light, but a powerful, mysterious being. They saw a source of life and a harbinger of death, a constant force that could not be controlled but must be revered. The sun was both a giver and a taker. Its absence brought darkness, cold, and danger, while its presence brought warmth, safety, and growth. It was in the wake of this awe and reverence for the sun that myths were born. The first myths were attempts to explain the forces that governed the natural world. These were not yet the intricate, detailed narratives that we find in ancient religious texts, but simple stories born of human curiosity and fear. The myth of the solar child, for example, may have begun as a story to explain the sun's rising and setting, and its life-giving power. The child, born of darkness but destined to rise each day to bring light and warmth to the world, was not just an explanation of the sun's movements, it was a symbolic representation of human existence itself. As early humans began to reflect on their own lives, they started to draw parallels between the cycle of the sun and their own experiences. Just as the sun rose each morning, bringing with it the potential for a new day, so too did every individual have the opportunity for renewal. The solar child myth embodied this idea: each day was a new chance for growth, for rebirth, and for the triumph of light over darkness. The solar child was a symbol of hope and transformation, a figure whose journey mirrored the human struggle for meaning and understanding. The development of language was another critical factor in this awakening of human consciousness. Language allowed humans to share not only practical information but also abstract ideas. Stories could be told, ideas could be passed down through generations, and beliefs could be formed and preserved. It was through storytelling that early humans were able to give meaning to their world, to understand their place in the cosmos, and to grapple with the existential questions that had begun to emerge. The stories they told were often rooted in the natural world, the cycles of the sun, the phases of the moon, the changing of the seasons, but they were more than mere observations. They were reflections of the human mind's growing ability to think abstractly, to symbolize, and to create meaning out of the mysteries of existence. In this context, the solar child myth became not only a representation of the sun's journey across the sky but also an embodiment of the human journey itself. The solar child, born in the darkness, grew to become a force of life and transformation. This myth reflected humanity's emerging awareness that life was cyclical, that it was marked by moments of birth, growth, decline, and rebirth. The darkness was not just an absence of light, but a necessary part of the cycle. It was in the darkness that the solar child was conceived, nurtured, and prepared for the journey ahead. And it was in the darkness of night that humanity, too, found the potential for renewal. As consciousness expanded, humans began to understand that they were part of something much larger than themselves. They were not just passive observers of the world, they were active participants in the cycles of life and death. They began to see themselves as connected to the natural world, to the rhythms of the earth, the movements of the stars, and the patterns of the sun. They were not isolated from the cosmos, they were intricately linked to it. This realization led to the development of a deeper sense of spirituality, as humans began to recognize that their own lives were part of a larger, cosmic order. In this early stage of human consciousness, the solar child myth became more than just a way to explain the sun's rise and set. It became a symbol of the human quest for meaning, for understanding, and for connection with the cosmos. The solar child was not merely an abstract concept, it was a reflection of humanity's own potential for growth and transformation. Just as the solar child emerged from the darkness to bring light and life to the world, so too could humans emerge from the darkness of ignorance, fear, and uncertainty to bring light to their own lives. The emergence of consciousness in early humans was not a linear process, it was a gradual unfolding of awareness, marked by moments of insight, confusion, and discovery. But with each step forward, humanity began to develop the tools, both intellectual and spiritual, that would enable them to understand the world around them. The solar child myth, in its simplest form, was a reflection of this journey, the journey from ignorance to knowledge, from darkness to light, from chaos to order. It was a journey that echoed through the myths, the stories, and the beliefs of early humans, and it continues to resonate with us today, as we too struggle to find our place in the vast, mysterious universe. The concept of duality is deeply embedded in the fabric of early human thought, particularly when it comes to the most fundamental forces of nature, the sun and the moon. These celestial bodies were not merely seen as objects in the sky but as powerful, oppositional forces that governed the rhythms of life. Their interactions, the ebb and flow of their cycles, seemed to mirror the larger cycles of existence, bringing into focus the eternal dance between light and darkness, day and night, life and death. For early humans, this cosmic duality was more than a simple observation of nature, it was an essential truth that defined their world and shaped their understanding of their place in it. The sun, undeniably, was the more revered of the two. Its light was not only life-giving but also a symbol of power, strength, and certainty. The sun was seen as a divine force, the source of warmth, fertility, and growth. Without the sun, nothing could thrive, plants would wither, animals would die, and humanity itself would cease to exist. The solar cycle was seen as a reflection of the divine order, a predictable rhythm that marked the passage of time and the unfolding of life. For early human societies, the sun was often personified as a god, a king, or a powerful spirit that ruled over the heavens and the earth. It was a force to be worshipped, celebrated, and feared in equal measure, for its power was both essential and overwhelming. It could bring the dawn of a new day, but it could also scorch the earth with its heat. In contrast, the moon was often seen as a more enigmatic and elusive presence. While the sun was associated with clarity, the moon was connected to mystery. It was a symbol of the night, a time of darkness and uncertainty, where hidden forces took shape and things were not as they seemed. The moon's light was pale and diffused, casting shadows that created a sense of unease and wonder. Unlike the sun, whose rise each morning was an expected event, the moon's phases were unpredictable, shifting from new to full and back again, its power waxing and waning in an eternal cycle. For early humans, the moon represented the unknown, the shifting, uncertain forces that existed in the world and within themselves. This duality of the sun and moon gave rise to myths that sought to explain their roles in the world. In many cultures, the sun and the moon were seen as siblings, lovers, or rivals, locked in an eternal dance that shaped the cosmos. Their relationship was often depicted as one of tension, with the sun representing order and the moon representing chaos, or the conscious mind versus the unconscious, light versus dark. In some traditions, the sun was the father, and the moon was the mother, symbolizing the interplay between masculine and feminine energies that gave birth to life itself. In others, the sun was a powerful god who controlled the day, while the moon was a more passive, mysterious figure, whose influence was felt most strongly during the night. In Egyptian mythology, for example, the sun god Ra was the supreme deity, the creator of life and the ruler of the heavens. Ra's journey across the sky, from sunrise to sunset, was a daily reenactment of creation itself, a symbol of the triumph of life over death. The moon, on the other hand, was personified by the god Khonsu, a youthful and unpredictable deity whose influence was felt in the hidden aspects of life. Khonsu's power was not constant, but fluctuated, reflecting the changing phases of the moon. The Egyptians saw the sun and the moon not just as celestial bodies but as divine forces that shaped the spiritual and physical realms. In Greek mythology, the sun god Helios was often depicted driving his chariot across the sky, bringing light and order to the world. His daily journey represented the fixed, predictable cycle of the sun's movement. The moon, however, was embodied by the goddess Selene, who drove a chariot of her own, but hers was a more mysterious and ethereal journey. Selene's light was softer, subtler, and her path was unpredictable, shifting with the phases of the moon. In Greek myth, the contrast between Helios and Selene was not just one of light versus dark, but also of certainty versus uncertainty, of control versus the unknown. Helios was a force that shaped the day, while Selene held sway over the night, guiding those who wandered in the darkness and revealing the hidden world. In many Native American traditions, the sun and moon were also seen as opposites, but their relationship was often framed in terms of balance rather than opposition. The sun represented the physical world, strength, action, and vitality, while the moon symbolized the spiritual world, introspection, and transformation. The duality between the two was not something to be feared but to be embraced, as both were essential to the natural order. The sun and moon were seen as partners in the cosmic dance, each playing its role in maintaining the balance of the universe. In some cultures, the sun was associated with masculinity, while the moon was linked to femininity. Together, they represented the complementary forces of creation, one active, one passive, working together to bring life into being. For early humans, the relationship between the sun and the moon was more than just a reflection of the natural world. It was an expression of the larger cosmic forces that shaped their lives, and it provided a framework for understanding the world around them. The interplay between light and dark was not just a physical phenomenon, it was a metaphor for the human experience. Life itself was defined by cycles of light and shadow, moments of clarity and understanding, followed by periods of confusion and uncertainty. The sun, with its bright, unyielding presence, represented moments of certainty, where everything was clear and in its place. The moon, with its changing phases, symbolized the times of darkness and transformation, when things were not as they seemed and when one had to navigate the unknown. This duality, which was reflected in the cycles of nature, also found its way into the human psyche. The light of the sun represented consciousness, awareness, and the ego, the aspects of the self that were visible and tangible. The moon, by contrast, represented the unconscious, the hidden parts of the self, the aspects of existence that were not easily understood or controlled. The contrast between the two forces mirrored the internal struggle that each person faced, the desire for clarity, understanding, and control versus the acceptance of mystery, uncertainty, and the unknown. It was through this tension that early humans began to shape their understanding of themselves and the universe. As time went on, this duality became more than just a cosmic observation, it became a spiritual framework. The sun and the moon, as forces of nature, became metaphors for the larger forces of life and death, creation and destruction, order and chaos. These opposites were not enemies, but partners in the great dance of existence, each necessary to the balance of the whole. The sun, with its life-giving energy, represented the active forces of creation, growth, movement, and action. The moon, with its mysterious, reflective light, represented the passive forces of transformation, death, renewal, and introspection. In the end, the sun and moon were not just opposites, they were complementary forces that defined the very structure of the cosmos and human existence. Each was incomplete without the other, and each played a vital role in maintaining the balance of the universe. The sun, in its brightness, brought clarity and order to the world, while the moon, in its subtle light, brought depth, mystery, and change. Together, they created a world in which light and dark, life and death, and certainty and uncertainty coexisted in a dynamic, ever-changing harmony. In the mythologies of ancient civilizations, the sun and moon were not just physical entities but powerful symbols of life, death, and everything in between. These celestial bodies, each with its own cycle and influence, were central to the way early humans understood the world. They weren't mere objects in the sky, but active participants in the story of creation, existence, and the human journey. Yet, as much as the sun was revered for its life-giving warmth and vitality, it was the moon that carried with it the deep mysteries of the night, those unspoken, uncharted realms where the unseen ruled. The moon was, in many ways, the keeper of secrets, the silent witness to humanity's fears, desires, and deep, inner struggles. The moon's presence in the night sky was a constant reminder of the unknown. Where the sun's light illuminated and made the world clear, the moon's pale glow seemed to obscure, to distort. Under the moonlight, shadows stretched long and the familiar became foreign. Unlike the sun, which followed a predictable, unyielding path across the sky, the moon's phases were unpredictable, changing from night to night, from new moon to full moon, and back again. This cycle, with its constant flux, seemed to mirror the very nature of life itself, always in motion, never static. The moon was seen as a symbol of impermanence, of the constant ebb and flow of existence. For many cultures, the moon's changing phases were linked to the passage of time, the rhythms of nature, and the cycles of human life. The idea of waxing and waning, of growth and decay, was not only observed in the moon but in the human experience as well. The full moon, when the lunar body was at its brightest, symbolized fulfillment, strength, and clarity. It was a time when things were illuminated, when secrets were revealed, and when the world felt most alive. But the new moon, on the other hand, was a time of darkness, mystery, and potential. It was a time of introspection, of hidden forces coming into play, and of transformation. In many ways, the moon embodied the idea that light and dark were not opposites but partners, working together to bring about the full circle of life. In various mythological traditions, the moon was often personified as a feminine force. The ancient Greeks, for example, associated the moon with the goddess Selene, a radiant and mysterious figure who traveled the night sky in a silver chariot drawn by horses. Selene's beauty and power were tied to the cycles of the moon, and she was often depicted as both nurturing and distant. Her light, unlike the sun's, was softer, more elusive, and it illuminated the night with a calm, reflective glow. The moon, as Selene, was not the force of action like the sun, but the quiet power of intuition, emotion, and change. In Roman mythology, the moon was personified by Diana, the goddess of the hunt, who also embodied the power of the moon in its phases. Diana was a protector of women, children, and the wilderness, but she was also a goddess of transformation. Her moon, like the phases of the lunar cycle, was a symbol of change and renewal. Diana's role in Roman culture highlighted the association between the moon and the mysteries of the natural world, its ability to govern the tides, control fertility, and dictate the unseen patterns of growth and decay. This connection between the moon and the feminine principle was not exclusive to Greek and Roman myths. Across cultures, the moon was frequently linked to female deities, representing qualities of intuition, emotion, and transformation. The moon's ability to change, to shift between light and dark, to wax and wane, made it a natural symbol for the cyclical nature of life itself. It mirrored the cycles of birth, growth, decline, and renewal, stages that every human would eventually experience. Just as the moon's phases were predictable yet mysterious, so too were the stages of life, known in their pattern but always tinged with the unknown. But beyond its association with femininity, the moon also represented a realm of inner knowledge, one that lay just beyond the reach of the conscious mind. The moon's light, though weaker than the sun's, had a unique power. It illuminated the darkness, revealing what was hidden from the eyes during the day. In the same way, the moonlight revealed the inner workings of the human psyche, the emotions, dreams, and desires that were often kept in the shadows of the unconscious. The moon, in its quiet, constant presence, was a symbol of the hidden self, the part of human experience that was not always seen or understood, but that shaped actions, decisions, and lives nonetheless. The relationship between the sun and the moon was often seen as one of opposition, yet in truth, it was a relationship of complementarity. Where the sun ruled the day with its bright, unwavering light, the moon ruled the night with its subtle, fluctuating glow. The two forces, though distinct, were part of a larger cosmic balance. The sun brought order, clarity, and vitality, while the moon brought mystery, introspection, and transformation. Each was necessary to the other. Without the moon's shadow, the sun's light would be too harsh, too direct. Without the sun's light, the moon would have no glow, no purpose. Together, they created the rhythm of day and night, of life and death, of clarity and mystery. This cosmic balance was reflected in the rhythms of human life. Just as the day alternates with the night, so too do the phases of human existence alternate between action and rest, certainty and doubt, light and darkness. The sun's energy, with its steady presence, was a symbol of the active, outward forces of life, growth, creation, and expansion. The moon, in contrast, was a symbol of the passive, inward forces of life, reflection, dissolution, and renewal. Each phase of life, like the phases of the moon, had its own rhythm, its own purpose, and its own set of lessons. And just as the moon's light could cast a gentle glow on the darkest of nights, so too could moments of reflection and quiet insight illuminate the deepest mysteries of existence. Yet, for all the moon's mystery and symbolism, it was always secondary to the sun. The sun's power was undeniable, and it was worshipped as the ultimate force of life. But the moon's role was equally important. Its changing phases were a constant reminder that life is not fixed, that everything is in flux. The sun's cycle might offer a sense of constancy, but the moon's unpredictability reminded humanity that life was full of uncertainty, transformation, and hidden depths. As early humans developed a more sophisticated understanding of the cosmos, the sun and the moon became central figures in the creation of calendars and the marking of time. The solar calendar, based on the predictable movement of the sun, became the basis for agriculture, for tracking the seasons, and for organizing human life around the cycle of planting and harvesting. The lunar calendar, by contrast, was more closely tied to the rhythms of human emotion, fertility, and spiritual cycles. The moon governed the tides, the rhythms of the body, and the cycles of nature in a way that the sun, with its constant light, did not. It was the moon that seemed to understand the fragility of life, the impermanence of all things, and the inevitable return of darkness before the dawn. In many ways, the moon's role in human life was one of quiet influence. While the sun demanded attention with its brilliance, the moon whispered its lessons. Its light was subtle but profound, its phases constant yet ever-changing. And like the moon itself, the lessons it imparted were not always easy to grasp, but they were always necessary. The moon, in its reflective, shifting light, mirrored the complexities of the human soul, its shadows, its mysteries, its hidden desires, and its constant yearning for meaning in a world that often seemed both illuminated and obscured. The dance of the sun and the moon, of light and dark, was the eternal dance of life itself. In the vast expanse of the night sky, the moon's glow was a constant companion to early humans, casting a soft, ethereal light over the land. Yet, it was not only its illumination of the dark that fascinated early humans, it was the moon's ability to govern the very rhythms of existence. The way it shaped tides, influenced the growth of plants, and even seemed to impact the moods and behaviors of humans made it an essential figure in the early understanding of nature. The moon was not simply a passive object that floated above but a force whose presence commanded attention and reverence. While the sun represented the visible, active forces of creation and life, the moon embodied the unseen, the cyclical, and the transformative. It spoke to a deeper, hidden order, where things were not always as they seemed, and where time itself ebbed and flowed like the tides. For early civilizations, the moon's phases provided a natural means of measuring time. The lunar cycle, with its 29 to 30-day span, marked the passage of each month, guiding the seasonal rhythms of life. Unlike the solar cycle, which could be fixed and predictable, the moon's phases were more mysterious and variable. It was in this unpredictability that the moon's power was felt. It was a force that could not be controlled or predicted with the same certainty as the sun. Its changing form, from new to full and back again, mirrored the transient nature of life itself. Nothing remained the same, and everything was subject to change. Life, like the moon, was marked by constant cycles of birth, growth, decline, and renewal. The moon's connection to time was not merely a practical one. Its phases also had symbolic meaning, representing the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. To early humans, the changing moon reflected their own journeys through life. The new moon, with its absence of light, represented beginnings, those moments in life when the path ahead was unclear, when the world seemed shrouded in mystery. It was a time for reflection, for planting seeds, both literally in the earth and figuratively in the soul. As the moon began to wax, its light slowly growing stronger, it mirrored the phases of growth and expansion in life. The full moon, when the moon was at its peak, was seen as a symbol of completion, achievement, and fullness, a time when the world felt most alive, when clarity and understanding reigned. But as the moon waned, its light dimming, it symbolized the inevitable decline, the moment when things faded, when clarity gave way to confusion and the world seemed to retreat into shadow. These phases of the moon were not seen as random or inconsequential. They were part of a larger cosmic order, one that governed not only the celestial bodies but the very rhythms of existence. Early humans did not view time in the linear fashion that we do today, but rather as a cyclical force. Just as the moon waxed and waned, so too did the seasons, the cycles of life, and the very nature of human existence. Birth, growth, decay, and death were not just human experiences but universal processes that applied to all things, from the smallest seed to the grandest of civilizations. The moon's rhythm mirrored these cycles, offering a pattern by which early humans could understand the forces of life that were otherwise invisible. As civilizations began to form and grow, the moon's influence extended beyond the personal and the natural world. It became a central figure in the spiritual and religious practices of many cultures. In ancient Egypt, the moon was associated with the goddess Isis, who embodied the mysteries of life, death, and resurrection. Isis was often depicted as a figure of both nurturing and destruction, reflecting the moon's dual nature as a symbol of both growth and decay. The moon, like Isis, was seen as a force that could heal and transform, but also one that held the power to destroy. In Egypt, the moon was also closely tied to the cycles of the Nile River, whose annual flooding and retreat mirrored the phases of the moon. The ebb and flow of the Nile, like the phases of the moon, were essential to the agricultural life of the Egyptians, and the two were forever linked in their minds. In Mesopotamian cultures, the moon was represented by the god Sin, who was often depicted as a wise, ancient figure, presiding over the night. Sin's role was not only that of a deity who governed the passage of time, but also one who oversaw the mysteries of the heavens and the earth. In Mesopotamian mythology, Sin was often associated with wisdom and knowledge, his light seen as a guide in the darkness of the night. As in other cultures, the moon in Mesopotamian belief symbolized the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth, as well as the constant interplay between light and dark, knowledge and ignorance. The Greeks, too, revered the moon, associating it with the goddess Artemis. Artemis was a complex deity, often depicted as both a protector of nature and a hunter of the wild, reflecting the moon's own dual role as both nurturing and fierce. Like the moon, Artemis was associated with the cycles of life, particularly those that revolved around fertility, childbirth, and the natural world. Artemis, in her role as the moon goddess, represented the timeless rhythm of nature and the mysteries that lay hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. Her moonlight illuminated the forests and fields, revealing the secrets of the natural world to those who could see beyond the veil of ordinary perception. The moon's connection to femininity and the feminine experience was widespread across cultures. Its phases, with their shifting, cyclical nature, were seen as reflections of the female experience of birth, growth, menstruation, and motherhood. The waxing and waning of the moon mirrored the cycles of fertility, reproduction, and the emotional and spiritual ebb and flow that many women experienced throughout their lives. In many cultures, the moon was seen as a goddess, a symbol of fertility and renewal, embodying the feminine power to create life, nurture it, and eventually bring it to an end. The moon, in its phases, symbolized both the beauty and the complexity of life's cyclical nature, a reminder that everything, from the smallest life form to the largest empire, is subject to change. But it was not only in its connection to femininity that the moon held sway over early human thought. The moon also represented the mysteries of the unknown. Unlike the sun, which revealed all, the moon was a light in the darkness, a subtle illumination that revealed only part of the picture. The moon's light was soft, indirect, and its power was often described as mysterious, capable of transforming ordinary objects into strange and unfamiliar forms. Under the moon's light, the world seemed to take on a different character, one that was magical, unpredictable, and full of possibility. The moon's ability to alter perception made it a symbol of the hidden forces that shaped the world, the unseen energies that governed human behavior, emotions, and even the physical realm. The moon's mysterious influence on the tides, on plant growth, and on the human psyche led early humans to believe that it was a force capable of influencing not only the natural world but the spiritual and emotional realms as well. In the modern era, we have come to understand the moon in scientific terms, as a satellite of the Earth, a barren rock whose gravitational pull creates the tides and influences certain physical processes. Yet, in the hearts and minds of early humans, the moon was much more than this. It was a living, breathing entity, a force whose power could not be easily explained, but whose presence was essential to the fabric of life. It was a force that linked humanity to the cosmos, to the great mysteries of the universe, and to the deep, cyclical rhythms of nature. As civilizations rose and fell, the moon remained a constant presence, an enduring symbol of the passage of time, the power of transformation, and the eternal dance between light and darkness. The cycles of the moon were not the only celestial rhythms that shaped early human existence. The sun, too, with its unwavering brilliance, played an equally important role in the development of ancient cultures and their understanding of the world. Where the moon's phases seem to hint at the mysteries of the unconscious, the sun's daily journey across the sky represented clarity, certainty, and order. It was a constant, predictable force, one that could be counted on to rise in the morning and set at night, with a precision that suggested divine purpose. The sun's power was not just physical but spiritual, offering a sense of control and meaning to early humans who looked up to the sky for guidance. Unlike the moon, which offered a subtle, ever-changing presence, the sun was straightforward and unyielding. Its light banished darkness and filled the world with warmth, making it the primary source of life. It was not merely a physical object but a symbol of divinity, creation, and vitality. Across the world, cultures recognized the sun as a god or a divine being. It was a source of energy, a ruler of the day, and often the center of worship and reverence. The idea of the sun as a god permeated many ancient religions, from the Egyptian Ra to the Incan Inti, and beyond. These cultures understood the sun as the vital force that drove life, sustaining both the physical world and the spiritual realm. The sun was the giver of light and life, but it was also a force that could destroy. The same sun that warmed the earth and nurtured plants also had the power to scorch the land, turning it barren and desolate. In ancient Egypt, Ra was the embodiment of the sun, and his journey across the sky was considered a representation of creation itself. Every day, Ra would rise in the east, crossing the heavens in his solar bark, bringing light and life to the world. His journey symbolized not only the passage of time but the eternal struggle between order and chaos, life and death. Ra's daily journey was a reflection of the cyclical nature of existence. Each sunrise was a new beginning, and each sunset marked the inevitable return of night and the forces of darkness. The Egyptians saw Ra as the ultimate force of creation, the one who brought life into being and who maintained the order of the cosmos. Without Ra's light, the world would fall into chaos, and life would cease to exist. This reverence for the sun as a source of order and life was reflected in their art, architecture, and religious practices, where depictions of Ra and his solar symbols were pervasive. In other cultures, the sun was just as central to religious and spiritual practices, but often with different interpretations and mythologies. In the Inca Empire, the sun god Inti was worshipped as the ancestor of the Incan people, the divine source of all power and prosperity. The sun was viewed as a protector, a source of guidance, and the lifeblood of the empire. The Inca believed that their ruler, the Sapa Inca, was a direct descendant of Inti, giving him the divine right to rule. In this way, the sun was not only a god but also a symbol of political power and authority, linking the earthly realm with the divine. The role of the sun as a symbol of life, order, and authority was not limited to ancient cultures. In many societies, the sun was a marker of the passage of time. Its predictable path through the sky allowed early humans to develop systems of timekeeping. The sun's movement was the foundation of the earliest calendars, and its appearance in the sky marked the beginning of the day, the year, and the seasons. It was through the sun that humans were able to gauge the changing of the seasons, and thus plan for planting, harvesting, and survival. The sun's unwavering reliability made it the perfect reference point for timekeeping, providing a sense of stability and certainty in a world that could often feel unpredictable and chaotic. Yet, despite the sun's powerful and life-giving qualities, there was an inherent paradox in its presence. While the sun was associated with vitality, growth, and life, it was also a reminder of mortality. The daily journey of the sun, from dawn to dusk, symbolized the inevitable passage of time and the approach of death. The sun, in its relentless march across the sky, reflected the fleeting nature of life itself. Each day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, it marked not just the end of the day but the reminder that everything was transient. Just as the sun rose again the next morning, bringing the promise of renewal and life, it also set, taking with it the certainty of death and decay. The sun's journey, then, was not only a symbol of life but also a reminder of death's inescapable embrace. This paradox of the sun as both life-giving and death-bringing was not lost on early humans. The sun's daily setting was often seen as a metaphor for the end of life, a time when darkness and the unknown would take over. It was during the night, under the moon's subtle glow, that the mysteries of existence were explored, and the hidden forces of nature and the spirit world were believed to be most active. The sun, as powerful and radiant as it was, represented the conscious world, the realm of the visible and the known. The night, under the watchful eye of the moon, represented the unconscious world, the realm of dreams, shadows, and transformation. Together, the sun and moon formed a balance between the known and the unknown, the seen and the unseen, the conscious and the unconscious. It was this balance that early humans sought to understand, for in the interplay between light and dark lay the secrets of life itself. In this context, the sun also became a symbol of the eternal struggle between good and evil, light and darkness. The sun's power to banish darkness was seen as a metaphor for the triumph of good over evil, knowledge over ignorance, and life over death. In many mythologies, the sun was associated with heroic figures, gods, kings, and warriors, who were tasked with protecting the world from the forces of darkness. The sun's rising each day was seen as the ultimate victory of light over the chaotic forces of the night. Yet, the sun's eventual descent into the horizon each evening was a reminder that darkness would always return, and with it, the inevitable struggle between order and chaos. This dynamic between light and dark, life and death, was central to many ancient stories. Heroes often embarked on quests that symbolized the journey from darkness to light, from ignorance to knowledge, and from death to life. The sun's role in these myths was not just as a source of light but as a divine guide, leading the hero toward the ultimate realization of truth and purpose. The sun, as the embodiment of clarity and life, served as the force that illuminated the path toward wisdom, redemption, and understanding. In many ways, the sun was both a literal and metaphorical guide for humanity, showing the way forward even as it reminded them of the inevitable cycle of life and death. As cultures continued to develop, the sun's symbolic power expanded beyond the realms of religion and mythology. The sun was also a symbol of unity, of the interconnectedness of all things. Its light shone on all corners of the earth, uniting the various peoples and nations under a common force. The sun's universal presence made it a symbol of both life and unity, a reminder that despite the differences between cultures, all were united by the same celestial body. The sun's light illuminated not only the physical world but also the shared human experience. Its presence was a constant reminder of the forces that bound humanity together, the cycles of nature, the passage of time, and the shared journey from birth to death. In the end, the sun was not just a celestial object, but a central figure in the collective consciousness of humanity, symbolizing life, death, renewal, and the eternal rhythms of existence. Its power was both literal and metaphorical, shaping not only the physical world but also the spiritual and psychological realms. It illuminated the mysteries of life while casting light on the eternal struggle between light and darkness, consciousness and the unconscious, life and death. The sun's presence was a reminder that the forces of nature were not separate from the human experience but were inextricably woven into the fabric of existence itself. The story of early humanity is, in many ways, the story of the struggle between light and dark, forces that shaped not only the natural world but also the very essence of human identity. From the very beginning, humans have been drawn to the interplay between these two cosmic forces, sensing that they held the key to understanding life itself. The sun, with its life-giving warmth, was revered as the primary source of light and clarity, while the moon, with its shifting phases, symbolized the hidden mysteries of the universe. Together, they formed a cosmic duet that echoed the eternal dance between known and unknown, visible and invisible, life and death. This duality was not just a reflection of the celestial world but of the human condition, our journey through existence, from birth to death, from light to shadow, and back again. As early humans began to establish societies, their understanding of the world became increasingly complex. The sun and moon, which had once been mere markers of time, were now seen as metaphors for deeper existential truths. The sun represented not only the physical force that governed the day but also the spirit of order, structure, and stability. It was a symbol of clarity, of knowledge that could be seen and understood. The moon, on the other hand, was a symbol of the unknown, the unconscious, and the mysteries that lay beyond human comprehension. Its phases, waxing, waning, full, and new, reflected the constant ebb and flow of life itself, where growth and decay were intertwined in an endless cycle. In many ancient cultures, the sun and moon were personified as gods and goddesses who governed the world of both the living and the dead. These deities were not merely representations of physical phenomena but embodied the forces of creation, destruction, and transformation. For example, in ancient Egypt, the sun god Ra was the supreme deity, the creator of the world and the ruler of the heavens. Ra's daily journey across the sky was a symbol of the ongoing struggle between order and chaos, life and death. At night, Ra would descend into the underworld, where he would fight the forces of darkness, ensuring that the sun would rise again the next day. In this way, Ra's journey mirrored the eternal cycle of life and death, of light and dark. The moon, too, had its own place in Egyptian mythology, with the goddess Isis representing the mysterious, transformative power of the lunar forces. In ancient Greece, the sun god Helios was depicted driving his chariot across the sky, bringing light to the earth and ruling over the day. His power was unwavering and certain, much like the sun itself. The moon, however, was represented by Selene, a goddess who drove her chariot across the night sky, casting a pale and mysterious light. Unlike the sun, which provided clarity and guidance, the moon's light was more subtle, less direct, and often associated with the hidden, the unconscious, and the unpredictable. Where Helios symbolized reason, logic, and control, Selene represented intuition, emotion, and the fluidity of the night. The contrast between these two gods, one embodying the power of the day and the other the mysteries of the night, reflected the larger philosophical duality between the known and the unknown, the conscious and the unconscious, reason and emotion. The relationship between the sun and moon was also mirrored in the symbolic duality of the masculine and feminine principles. Across many cultures, the sun was associated with masculine energy, strong, active, and dominant, while the moon was often linked to feminine energy, receptive, passive, and cyclical. The sun's steady, unchanging presence symbolized the rational, outward-focused aspects of life, while the moon's fluctuating phases symbolized the emotional, inward aspects of existence. This duality was not just a reflection of gender roles but a deeper philosophical and spiritual truth about the balance of opposites within the universe. The sun and moon were not enemies, but complementary forces that, together, created the harmony of the cosmos. Without the sun, life would cease to exist, and without the moon, the forces of change and transformation would be absent. They were two halves of a greater whole, each contributing to the balance and unity of the universe. As early humans grappled with the mysteries of life, the sun and moon became central to their understanding of time and existence. The cycles of the moon, with its ebbing and flowing light, mirrored the cycles of life itself, the rhythms of birth, growth, decay, and renewal. The moon's phases provided a natural metaphor for the human experience of change, transformation, and the passage of time. Just as the moon's light waned and then waxed again, so too did the human experience of life. Moments of clarity, growth, and vitality were followed by periods of darkness, introspection, and challenge. The full moon, in its brightest and most powerful phase, symbolized the peak of human potential, the times when individuals felt most alive, most capable, and most connected to the world around them. The new moon, in contrast, represented the moments of darkness and uncertainty, those times when one's path was unclear, and the future was shrouded in mystery. The sun, in its steady rise and set, offered a contrasting view of time. While the moon symbolized the inner world of emotions and cycles, the sun represented the outer world of action and accomplishment. The sun's unyielding journey across the sky provided a sense of stability and order, a predictable rhythm that guided the flow of life. The sun's light was the force that illuminated the world, providing clarity and understanding. In contrast to the moon's shifting phases, the sun was a constant presence, a symbol of the tangible, visible world and the certainty that comes with it. The sun, like the masculine principle, was active, dominant, and reliable, while the moon, like the feminine principle, was passive, receptive, and mysterious. Together, these two celestial bodies created a dynamic tension that defined the cycles of nature and the human experience. For early humans, the cycles of the sun and moon also represented the balance between the material and spiritual realms. The sun's light illuminated the physical world, providing warmth, sustenance, and vitality. It was the source of life itself, the force that nourished crops, sustained animals, and allowed human beings to thrive. Yet the sun also represented the spiritual realm, the force that connected the material world to the divine. In many cultures, the sun was seen as the embodiment of the gods themselves, a divine presence that bestowed light, life, and order upon the world. The moon, on the other hand, was seen as the gateway to the hidden, the mysterious, and the unseen. The moon's light was subtle and indirect, symbolizing the inner world of the soul, the unconscious, and the spiritual journey. Where the sun illuminated the physical world, the moon illuminated the soul, guiding the individual on a path of inner discovery, transformation, and enlightenment. This interplay between the physical and spiritual worlds was reflected in the way that early humans interacted with the natural world. They understood that the sun and moon were not just distant, impersonal objects in the sky but forces that shaped their lives and their understanding of existence. The daily rise and fall of the sun marked the rhythm of life, from the first light of dawn to the dark of night. The moon's phases, with their shifting light and shadow, mirrored the inner workings of the human soul, its cycles of growth, decay, and renewal. Together, the sun and moon formed the eternal backdrop against which the story of humanity unfolded. In their cycles, humans found both guidance and mystery, clarity and confusion, light and darkness. The journey of life was marked by these cosmic rhythms, and through them, humanity learned to navigate the challenges of existence and seek meaning in a world of constant change. In every ancient civilization, the sky was not merely a backdrop to daily life but a source of profound meaning and reflection. The celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, the stars, were seen not only as physical entities but as carriers of divine influence, guiding human beings in ways both visible and invisible. This celestial connection was not a passive observation, rather, early humans saw themselves as participants in a grand, cosmic drama, where the movements of the stars and the rhythms of the sun and moon echoed the larger patterns of existence. What happened above in the heavens, it was believed, mirrored what transpired below, on earth. This belief, deeply rooted in myth and ritual, shaped how people understood their place in the world, their relationship to the divine, and their responsibilities to the earth. As early civilizations began to form, their relationship with the celestial world became increasingly sophisticated. The sky was no longer a vast, empty expanse but a domain where gods, spirits, and powerful forces resided. These celestial entities were seen as both protectors and rulers, whose favor was necessary for the continuation of life. In the case of the sun and moon, they were seen as powerful deities whose movements were not arbitrary but had a divine purpose. The sun, with its daily journey across the sky, was viewed as a symbol of creation, stability, and clarity. It was a force that brought order to the world, dispelling darkness and chaos with its light. The moon, in contrast, was a more enigmatic figure, whose changing phases reflected the cycles of nature and the rhythms of human life. It was a symbol of transformation, mystery, and the hidden forces that governed existence. Together, these two celestial bodies shaped not only the physical world but the spiritual and philosophical understanding of life itself. The symbolism of the sun and moon in ancient cultures was deeply intertwined with the cycles of life. In many ways, the life cycle of a human being mirrored the movements of these two celestial bodies. Birth, growth, maturity, death, and rebirth were the natural processes that defined the human experience, and these processes were reflected in the daily and annual cycles of the sun and moon. The sun, with its unwavering consistency, represented life's outward, active forces, those moments of clarity, growth, and productivity. The moon, with its constantly changing phases, symbolized the inner, more mysterious aspects of life, those moments of introspection, transformation, and rest. The dance between the sun and moon was the dance of life itself, the balance between action and stillness, light and shadow, certainty and mystery. The moon's connection to the cycles of life was particularly evident in the way it governed time. The lunar cycle, lasting about 29.5 days, was used to track the months, marking the passage of time in a way that was deeply connected to the rhythms of nature. This lunar calendar, based on the moon's phases, was used by many ancient cultures to time important events, such as planting and harvesting, religious ceremonies, and the measurement of human life. The waxing and waning of the moon were seen as a reflection of the cycles of growth and decay that governed the natural world. Just as the moon grew full and then receded, so too did the seasons change, bringing life and death in their wake. The moon, as a measure of time, was a reminder that all things were subject to cyclical forces, that birth and death, creation and destruction, were not linear events but part of an eternal cycle that repeated itself over and over again. This cycle was not just seen in the physical world but in the human soul as well. The phases of the moon mirrored the emotional and psychological journey that individuals experienced throughout their lives. The new moon, with its absence of light, was seen as a time of darkness and introspection, a time for reflection and renewal. It was a time when the soul was hidden from the world, when the individual could look inward and search for meaning. As the moon began to wax, growing brighter and fuller, it symbolized the process of growth, of bringing what was hidden in the darkness into the light. The full moon, in its peak of brightness, represented the culmination of effort, the moment of clarity and understanding. It was a time of enlightenment, when the world seemed full of possibilities. But as the moon began to wane, its light dimming once again, it symbolized the return to the hidden, the mysterious, and the unknown. It was a time for letting go, for releasing the past, and preparing for the next cycle of growth. In this way, the phases of the moon became a metaphor for the emotional and psychological journey of the individual, reflecting the ebb and flow of life itself. In many ancient mythologies, the sun and moon were personified as gods or divine beings who represented the cosmic forces that governed both the natural and spiritual worlds. These deities were not distant, abstract figures, but active participants in the drama of human life. The sun was often depicted as a god of creation and order, bringing light and clarity to the world. In ancient Egypt, for example, the sun god Ra was seen as the creator of all things, the one who brought the world into being and who ensured its continued existence. Ra's daily journey across the sky, from east to west, was a powerful symbol of the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Each sunrise represented a new beginning, and each sunset marked the end of a cycle. Ra's journey also mirrored the journey of the soul, as it descended into the underworld at night, only to rise again the next morning in a perpetual cycle of renewal. The moon, in contrast, was often depicted as a more mysterious and enigmatic figure, representing the hidden forces of the universe. In many cultures, the moon was associated with femininity, intuition, and transformation. In Greek mythology, the moon was personified by the goddess Selene, who drove her chariot across the night sky. Selene's role in mythology was to guide souls through the darkness, helping them navigate the unseen realms of the world. Like the moon itself, Selene was both nurturing and mysterious, embodying the dual nature of the lunar force, both a source of illumination and a harbinger of change. The moon's phases were also linked to the cycles of human life, particularly the cycles of birth, death, and rebirth. Just as the moon's light waxed and waned, so too did the human soul undergo periods of growth and decline, of clarity and confusion. The moon, in this sense, was a symbol of transformation, of the constant movement between light and shadow, known and unknown. The sun and moon, in their cosmic dance, also represented the forces of opposites that governed the world. Light and dark, male and female, creation and destruction, these dualities were not seen as opposing forces but as complementary aspects of a greater whole. In many ancient cultures, the sun and moon were viewed as two halves of the same divine essence, each representing a different aspect of the universe. The sun, with its fiery, outward energy, symbolized the active, masculine principle, while the moon, with its cool, reflective light, symbolized the passive, feminine principle. Together, they created a balance, a harmony that was necessary for the continued existence of the world. Without the sun, life would not exist, and without the moon, the mysteries of the universe would remain hidden. It was only through the interplay of these two forces that the cycle of life and death, growth and decay, could continue. In the end, the sun and moon were not just celestial bodies but powerful symbols of the deeper truths that governed existence. They represented the forces that shaped the natural world, the cycles of life and death, and the eternal rhythms of time. They were not mere observers of human life but active participants in the grand drama of existence, guiding, shaping, and reflecting the journey of the soul. Through their movements and their phases, the sun and moon taught early humans about the nature of change, the impermanence of all things, and the beauty of the eternal cycle of life. The sun's steady light and the moon's shifting glow were a constant reminder that life, like the cosmos, was a dynamic, ever-changing process, one that demanded both action and reflection, both clarity and mystery. As early humans observed the sky, they saw not just a vast expanse of stars, planets, and the great celestial bodies of the sun and moon, but a cosmic theater, where the movements of these celestial entities seemed to reflect the deeper rhythms of their own existence. The regularity of the sun's rise and set, the waxing and waning of the moon, and the patterns of the stars were not just physical phenomena to be observed, they were signs, portents, and messages from the gods. To the ancients, the sky was not merely the backdrop of their daily lives, but a map that guided their spiritual and physical journey. The movements of the sun and moon, their interplay, held deep philosophical meaning that reached beyond astronomy, into the heart of how early humans understood themselves and their place in the universe. The sun, with its predictable, life-giving power, was more than a source of warmth. It was a symbol of divine providence, the very embodiment of life itself. Without the sun, nothing could live, and it was the sun's ever-presence that gave people a sense of security. It was a constant, something to be relied upon, and as such, the sun became central to almost every early mythological system. From the ancient Egyptians, where Ra, the sun god, was the highest deity and creator of all things, to the Inca Empire, where Inti was venerated as the ancestor of the Inca people, the sun was seen as the giver of life. The sun provided the conditions for life to grow, for crops to be cultivated, and for civilizations to thrive. Yet, the sun's unyielding brightness and dominance over the day were also a reminder of the harshness and inevitability of death. The setting of the sun each evening was seen as a metaphor for the end of life, a reminder that all things must eventually decline, that even the brightest of lights would inevitably be extinguished. As the sun disappeared beneath the horizon, darkness would descend, and the cycle would repeat. In the darkness, the moon would emerge, bringing with it a different set of meanings, one that was more mysterious, more fluid. The moon was not predictable in the same way the sun was, and it was this mystery that made the moon such a fascinating celestial body. Its shifting phases, from the dark, empty new moon to the brilliant fullness of the full moon, represented the ebb and flow of existence itself. In a world that was often chaotic and uncertain, the moon's cycles offered a mirror to the fluctuations of life, birth, growth, decline, and death. The moon, like the tides, was a reflection of the forces of nature that governed everything, and its mysterious phases seemed to hold lessons about the impermanence of life. The waxing and waning of the moon were a natural metaphor for the transient nature of existence. At the new moon, when the moon was hidden from view, it symbolized a time of quiet, of potential yet to be realized. It was the moment before the beginning, when everything was still, when there was no light to guide the way. This phase, often linked with darkness and the unknown, marked the moments in a human's life when they were in the midst of an uncertain beginning, when they were called to step into the unknown, often without a clear sense of direction. Just as the moon hid from sight, so too would humans often feel lost or unsure during the times in their lives when they were on the threshold of something new. Yet, as the moon began to wax, its light growing steadily brighter with each passing night, it symbolized the moment of growth, of emergence from the shadows. It was a time of development, of moving forward toward a greater understanding of oneself, much like the growing light of the moon illuminating the path ahead. The full moon was the apex of this cycle, the moment of realization, clarity, and understanding. It was the point in life where everything came into focus, where the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The full moon represented completion, a sense of fulfillment and achievement. It was the point when the forces of the universe aligned in harmony, and the world seemed to be at its fullest potential. For many ancient cultures, the full moon was a symbol of the completion of a spiritual or earthly journey. It was a time when clarity prevailed, when the mysteries of the unknown were revealed in full light. Yet, even at this peak of clarity, the moon began to wane, slowly but inevitably losing its brilliance. This waning process symbolized the return to darkness, a reminder that everything, even moments of perfection, are fleeting. As the moon's light began to dim, so too did the human experience of growth and achievement begin to give way to decay, to the inevitable decline that comes with age, illness, or failure. This process of waxing and waning, of light growing and receding, was not just a celestial phenomenon, but a reflection of the human experience itself. Life, like the moon, was marked by cycles of growth and decline, of light and dark. The human condition was one of constant fluctuation, constantly moving from moments of clarity to times of uncertainty, from birth to death, and back again in a never-ending cycle. The moon's phases, with their symbolic representation of the stages of life, offered early humans a way to understand and cope with the impermanence of existence. The moon's cycles offered comfort in knowing that change was natural, that even after the darkest of nights, there would always be a return to light, a new beginning, a new cycle of growth. But the moon was not simply a symbol of the human journey through life, it also served as a guide for practical matters, particularly in the realms of agriculture and navigation. Early human societies, dependent on the rhythms of nature for survival, would have closely observed the moon's phases, using them to determine when to plant crops, harvest, and hunt. The moon's predictable cycles became a natural rhythm for life, one that governed the seasons and dictated when certain tasks should be performed. The full moon, for instance, was often seen as a time to harvest, when the brightest light of the moon would illuminate the fields, making it easier to work in the dark hours of the night. Similarly, the new moon, a time of darkness, was often seen as a time for rest, for renewal, and for reflection before the next cycle of action began. For the ancient peoples who lacked modern clocks and calendars, the moon's phases provided a natural method of measuring time. The lunar cycle became the basis for early calendars, helping societies track time not just for practical purposes but for religious and spiritual reasons as well. The phases of the moon were imbued with spiritual meaning, marking sacred times for rituals, prayers, and celebrations. The moon's constant ebb and flow served as a reminder that life was a series of rhythms, of action and rest, of light and dark, of beginnings and endings. By understanding the moon's cycles, early humans could align their lives with the larger rhythms of the universe, finding meaning and purpose in the natural flow of time. In many cultures, the moon was also seen as a protector. Its light in the darkness was a symbol of guidance and safety, especially during the night, when the world was most dangerous. The moon, in its gentle illumination, offered a sense of security, a reminder that no matter how dark the world may seem, there is always light somewhere, guiding the way. The moon was a figure of calm amidst the chaos, offering solace to those who wandered the earth under its gaze. It was a celestial presence that, while changing and shifting, always remained a steady companion through the darkest of times. This sense of the moon as a protector is reflected in the many myths and legends of lunar deities who watched over humanity, offering their light during times of hardship and darkness. The symbolism of the moon, with its cycles of growth and decay, its interplay of light and shadow, speaks to the fundamental nature of existence itself. It serves as a mirror to our own lives, reminding us of the inherent impermanence of all things, the constant fluctuation between birth and death, light and dark. The moon teaches us that nothing in life is ever static, that all things are subject to change, to growth and decline, and that even in our darkest times, there is the potential for renewal. Just as the moon waxes and wanes, so too do we experience phases of expansion and contraction, of clarity and confusion. It is in understanding these cycles that we come to terms with the natural flow of life, learning to embrace both the light and the darkness that define our existence. In ancient times, the rhythm of the day was not just dictated by the sun's rising and setting but was deeply entwined with the very essence of human existence. The sun, casting its powerful light over the earth, was the ultimate symbol of clarity, purpose, and creation. But beyond its role as a life-giver, it was the foundation of something much greater, a system of understanding, of cosmic order that defined not just the cycles of the natural world, but the way people lived, thought, and viewed the very nature of their reality. The sun's powerful and predictable presence created a sense of constancy, a foundation upon which early humans could base their understanding of time, life, and their place in the world. The predictable movements of the sun provided humans with a semblance of control in a world that was often wild and unpredictable. Unlike the moon, whose light fluctuated and whose phases shifted unpredictably, the sun rose each day with an unyielding consistency, bringing light to the earth and ensuring that the world would not fall into perpetual darkness. This daily rebirth of the sun was not just a practical observation but a deep spiritual truth. The daily journey of the sun was seen by many ancient cultures as an eternal cycle of birth, life, and death. From the first light of dawn, when darkness retreated and the world was born anew, to the sunset, when the sun descended into the night to face its journey into the underworld, the sun's path was an ever-present metaphor for the cycles of life and the human condition. Each dawn was a symbol of hope and renewal, while each sunset marked the inevitable approach of night, the time of rest, of death, and transformation. The ancient Egyptians, for example, revered the sun god Ra as the supreme deity of creation. Ra was not just the ruler of the heavens but the very force that created and maintained order in the world. The Egyptians believed that every sunrise marked Ra's rebirth, a daily victory over the forces of chaos. In their worldview, Ra's passage through the sky was symbolic of the soul's journey through life, death, and the afterlife. His daily death and rebirth mirrored the cycle of human existence, with each sunrise offering a chance for spiritual renewal and growth. Ra's journey was not just a reflection of the natural world, it was a guiding force for understanding the cyclical nature of life itself. The sun's light was a source of both physical sustenance and spiritual clarity, illuminating not just the land but the hearts and minds of the people. The idea of light as clarity and illumination was central to early human conceptions of knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Light was often associated with reason, logic, and clarity of thought, while darkness was seen as a symbol of ignorance, confusion, and the unknown. The sun's light was the embodiment of understanding and insight, casting light on the mysteries of the universe. The concept of enlightenment, in many ways, came from the simple yet profound act of the sun rising each day, bringing with it a sense of purpose and direction. To ancient people, the sun's light provided a moral compass, guiding them through the day and allowing them to see the world around them with clarity. Just as the sun illuminated the earth, so too did it offer illumination to the mind, dispelling the shadows of ignorance and confusion. But the sun's influence was not limited to providing light, it was also a force of life itself. Without the sun, the earth would be a barren, lifeless place. The sun's warmth nurtured crops, sustained animals, and provided the energy needed for life to thrive. It was through the sun that plants grew, seasons changed, and time itself was marked. The sun's steady cycle, as it moved across the sky, created the natural order that governed the rhythms of nature, planting, growing, harvesting, and resting. The ancient peoples understood that their very survival depended on the sun's cycles. The rising and setting of the sun determined when crops should be planted and harvested, when to prepare for the changing seasons, and when to rest. In this way, the sun was the ultimate provider, not just of light, but of life itself. Without it, nothing would grow, and the very fabric of existence would unravel. The power of the sun to sustain life was reflected in its centrality to ancient religions and mythologies. Across cultures, the sun was not just a physical object, it was a divine being, a god that represented the life-giving forces of the universe. The sun was often seen as the ruler of the day, the governing force that brought structure and stability to the world. It was a symbol of order, a counterbalance to the unpredictable forces of chaos. In many cultures, the sun was associated with masculinity, strength, and power, attributes that were necessary to maintain the balance of the world. The Egyptians, for instance, saw Ra as the embodiment of divine power and kingship, the force that maintained the cosmic order. In the Inca Empire, the sun god Inti was seen as the ancestor of the Incan people, a divine figure whose favor was necessary for the prosperity of the empire. In both cultures, the sun was not just a physical force, but a divine ruler whose presence was essential for the world to function. Yet, despite the sun's power and life-giving force, there was an inherent paradox in its nature. As much as the sun was a symbol of life, it was also a reminder of death. The daily setting of the sun marked the approach of night, a time of darkness and rest. The sun's inevitable descent into the horizon each evening was a symbol of the inevitable decline that all things must face. Just as the sun rose each morning, so too did it set each evening, reminding people that all things in life, no matter how bright or powerful, must eventually fade. The sun's descent into the night was a powerful metaphor for the inevitability of death, the end of all things, and the transition from life to the unknown. Yet, even in its descent, the sun carried with it a promise of renewal. For just as the sun set, it would rise again the next day, bringing with it the hope of new beginnings, of rebirth and regeneration. This eternal cycle of death and rebirth, embodied by the sun, became the foundation of many ancient beliefs about the afterlife. The sun's setting was seen as the soul's journey into the underworld, while its rising was the soul's return to the world of the living. In many ancient mythologies, the setting of the sun was not seen as a mere physical event but as a profound spiritual journey. The sun's journey into the underworld, as it descended below the horizon, was seen as a symbolic passage of the soul through death and into the afterlife. In ancient Egyptian mythology, for example, the sun god Ra was believed to journey through the underworld each night, battling the forces of darkness and chaos. This journey was seen as an allegory for the soul's journey after death, when it would descend into the realm of the dead before being reborn in the morning. The sun's descent and subsequent rebirth represented the eternal cycle of life, death, and resurrection. The idea that the sun's setting was a metaphor for death, and its rising a symbol of resurrection, reinforced the connection between the sun and the cycles of human existence. The connection between the sun's journey and the human experience was not just a physical or symbolic one, it was deeply spiritual. The sun's life-giving light was seen as a manifestation of divine power, and its cycles were believed to mirror the spiritual journey of the soul. Just as the sun moved through the day, from dawn to dusk, so too did the soul move through life, from birth to death. The sun's rise and fall reflected the stages of existence: birth, growth, decline, and death, offering early humans a profound way to understand their own mortality. The sun, in all its power and majesty, reminded people of the fleeting nature of life, the inevitability of death, and the promise of renewal. This spiritual connection to the sun was central to many ancient religions, where the sun was not just a celestial body, but a divine force that governed both the physical and spiritual worlds. In the same way that the sun governed the natural world, it was believed to govern the fate of the soul. The daily journey of the sun, from its birth at dawn to its death at sunset, was seen as a mirror for the soul's own journey through life. The ancient understanding of the sun's cycle as both a symbol of life and death, light and dark, order and chaos, was a way to grasp the deeper meanings of existence. Through the sun's movement, early humans understood not only the rhythms of the earth but the larger, more cosmic rhythms that governed their lives and destinies. Thus, the sun was not just a physical presence in the sky, it was the central force of cosmic order, a symbol of life, death, and renewal. It was the very heartbeat of existence, a reminder of the cyclical nature of life itself. Through the sun, early humans understood the profound truth that all things are born, grow, die, and are reborn. And just as the sun rose each day, so too did they carry with them the hope that, in the end, there would be a return to light, to life, and to renewal. As human societies began to form and develop, the connection between the celestial bodies and the human experience deepened. This connection was not simply a passive observation of the heavens, but an active participation in a larger cosmic drama that governed both the physical world and the unseen forces of the universe. The movements of the sun and moon were seen not only as natural phenomena but as symbols of deeper truths that guided the rhythms of life and death, creation and destruction, light and darkness. These celestial forces were thought to be connected to the cycles of the human soul and to the larger cosmic order, and through their observation, ancient people sought to understand not only their own lives but the very nature of existence itself. In many ways, the sun and moon were seen as metaphors for the dualities that defined the human experience. The sun, with its unyielding brightness and life-giving warmth, represented the visible, outward aspects of life, growth, clarity, stability, and order. It was a symbol of the active forces of creation, of life's potential to grow, expand, and thrive. The moon, on the other hand, with its shifting phases and more subtle light, represented the inner, more mysterious aspects of existence, emotions, intuition, transformation, and the cycles of life and death. While the sun illuminated the world in its full glory, the moon cast a softer, more enigmatic light that beckoned the soul to explore the hidden realms of the unconscious, the unknown, and the intangible. Together, these two celestial bodies formed a complementary pair, each representing different aspects of the human journey. The sun's role in ancient cultures was clear: it was the giver of life, the source of warmth and vitality, the sustainer of the natural world. Without the sun, the earth would be a barren, lifeless place. It was through the sun's light that the world was made visible, that crops could grow, and that life could flourish. The sun's consistent rise and set gave a sense of rhythm and order to life, marking the passing of days and seasons. For early agricultural societies, the sun was the central force in the cycle of planting, growing, and harvesting. It governed the very rhythms of life, providing the conditions necessary for survival. The daily appearance of the sun was a reminder that life was cyclical, that each day was a new beginning, and that with each dawn came the potential for new growth, new possibilities, and new opportunities. Yet, as essential as the sun was to life, it was also a symbol of something more, a reminder of the fragility of existence. The sun's daily descent into the horizon marked the end of the day, a metaphor for the inevitable decline that all things must face. Just as the sun set each evening, so too did everything in life eventually come to an end. The setting sun, disappearing into the night, was a symbol of death, of the transitory nature of life. But within that descent was also the promise of rebirth. For the sun, as it set, was not gone forever. It would rise again the next morning, bringing with it new light, new life, and a new cycle. This endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth was at the heart of many ancient cultures' understanding of existence. Life, like the sun, was in constant motion, ever-changing, moving from light to darkness and back again. The moon, in contrast to the sun, was not as predictable. Its phases shifted, waxing and waning, moving from the dark new moon to the full moon and back again. This cyclical nature of the moon was a powerful metaphor for the human experience of change, growth, and transformation. The moon's phases symbolized the constant flux of life, where moments of clarity and brightness gave way to periods of darkness and uncertainty. The new moon, with its absence of light, represented times of introspection, of hidden potential, and of new beginnings. It was a time for the soul to rest, to gather strength, and to prepare for the cycle of growth that would come with the waxing moon. As the moon began to wax, its light grew, symbolizing growth and progress. This was a time when the individual moved forward, expanding, exploring, and striving toward greater understanding. The waxing moon, growing ever brighter with each night, represented the human drive for self-improvement, for enlightenment, and for transformation. It was a time of action, of pushing forward, of embracing the possibilities that lay ahead. The full moon, at its peak, represented the culmination of effort, the achievement of goals, and the fullness of life. It was a time when everything seemed to fall into place, when clarity and understanding illuminated the path ahead. But even at the height of its brightness, the moon began to wane, its light slowly receding, symbolizing the inevitable return to darkness, to rest, and to the cyclical nature of existence. The waning moon, with its diminishing light, represented decline, reflection, and letting go. It was a time for release, for reflection on what had been accomplished, and for preparing for the next cycle. Just as the moon's light faded, so too did the individual face the inevitable process of aging, of decay, and of letting go of what no longer served. The waning moon was a reminder that everything in life, no matter how vibrant or full, would eventually fade, and that in that fading there was wisdom to be found. The decline of the moon, like the decline of the human body, was not something to be feared, but something to be accepted as part of the natural rhythm of life. The interplay between the sun and moon, the constant balance of light and dark, growth and decline, was a reflection of the larger cycles that govern the natural world. These cycles were not just physical processes, they were deeply spiritual and philosophical. In many ancient cultures, the sun and moon were seen as representations of the eternal dance between opposites, the balance of forces that held the universe together. The sun, with its strength and stability, represented the active, outward energy of the universe. The moon, with its shifting, cyclical nature, represented the passive, inward energy, the force of transformation and change. Together, these forces created a dynamic balance, each complementing the other, each necessary for the continued harmony of the universe. This balance between light and dark, order and chaos, life and death, was not just a cosmic principle, it was a principle that governed the lives of early humans. The sun and moon, with their powerful symbolism, offered a way to understand the rhythms of existence and the human condition. The constant cycles of birth, growth, decay, and rebirth mirrored the experiences of individuals as they journeyed through life. Just as the sun rose each day, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings, so too did humans wake each morning with the possibility of starting anew. But like the sun, life was also marked by inevitable decline, by moments of darkness and uncertainty. Just as the moon waned, so too did individuals face moments of loss, of reflection, and of change. The sun and moon also offered early humans a way to navigate the world around them. The rhythms of the sun and moon were not just spiritual or symbolic, they were practical as well. In agricultural societies, the sun's patterns governed the seasons, determining when to plant, harvest, and prepare for the changing year. The moon's phases also played an important role in tracking time and marking important events, such as religious ceremonies, festivals, and important life milestones. The lunar cycle, with its connection to the tides and to the natural world, was a way to synchronize human activity with the larger rhythms of the earth. Over time, the connection between the sun, the moon, and human existence became more than just a way to mark time or understand the world, it became a source of philosophical and spiritual insight. The sun and moon were no longer just celestial bodies to be observed, they became symbols of the larger mysteries of existence, representing the eternal cycles of creation, destruction, and renewal that governed the cosmos. These cycles were not just external events, they were a reflection of the inner world of the individual, of the soul's journey through life. The sun and moon, in all their mystery and power, became guides, helping early humans navigate the complexities of existence, offering wisdom, comfort, and insight in times of uncertainty. The ancient connection between the sun, the moon, and humanity remains a powerful reminder that life, like the celestial bodies, is in constant motion, always growing, always changing, always cycling between light and dark. It is this cyclical nature, this ebb and flow of existence, that shapes the very essence of life itself. And just as the sun and moon continue their eternal dance across the sky, so too does humanity continue its journey through the cycles of birth, growth, decay, and rebirth. These cosmic rhythms, ancient and timeless, offer a way to understand the larger patterns of existence, helping us find meaning and purpose in the ever-changing journey of life. As the ancient civilizations looked to the sky, they began to recognize not only the constant movement of the sun and moon but also the subtle but powerful impact these celestial bodies had on their daily lives. Beyond the practicalities of timekeeping and navigation, the heavens held deep spiritual and philosophical significance, shaping the way people perceived their place in the world and their relationship to the divine. The sun and moon were not merely physical entities that governed the cycles of day and night, they were symbols of something much larger, forces that transcended the mundane and connected humanity to the cosmic order. This connection between the celestial and the earthly worlds was central to how early humans made sense of existence, death, and the mysteries of life. The movements of the sun and moon became a language through which the divine was understood and communicated. The sun, in its unyielding light, was often associated with masculine energy, power, creation, and clarity. The moon, with its shifting phases, was more enigmatic, tied to the feminine, intuition, and mystery. The sun's consistent, predictable rise and fall symbolized stability and order, while the moon's erratic, cyclical changes were emblematic of the mysterious, ever-changing nature of life itself. Together, these two forces formed a dualistic balance, a yin and yang of sorts, that represented the dynamic interplay of opposites that characterized the universe. The ancient Egyptians, for example, saw the sun as a representation of Ra, the supreme god of creation and light. Ra's journey across the sky each day was a reflection of the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Just as the sun rose in the morning, bringing light and warmth to the world, it also set in the evening, descending into the underworld, symbolizing death and the inevitable return to darkness. Yet, this descent was not the end. The sun's eventual return to the sky each morning symbolized resurrection and renewal. Ra's daily journey encapsulated the human experience, the cycle of life, the inevitability of death, and the promise of rebirth. Similarly, in many cultures, the moon was personified as a deity that governed not just the night sky but the inner rhythms of the human soul. The moon's phases, from the new moon to the full moon and back again, mirrored the natural cycles of growth, decay, and transformation that humans experienced throughout their lives. The new moon, with its absence of light, symbolized the hidden, unknown aspects of the self, those moments of darkness and introspection when one is in the process of becoming. The waxing moon, growing steadily brighter each night, represented growth, manifestation, and the journey toward enlightenment. The full moon, with its brilliant light, represented clarity, realization, and completion. But as the moon began to wane, its light gradually receding, it symbolized the process of letting go, of surrendering to the inevitable decline, and making space for new beginnings. The waning moon was not a symbol of death, but of transformation, a reminder that all things must eventually return to the darkness from which they came, only to rise again. The full moon, in particular, held deep significance in many cultures. Its light illuminated the night, dispelling darkness and casting everything in a serene, otherworldly glow. In some cultures, the full moon was seen as a time of spiritual awakening, when the veil between the physical world and the unseen realm was thinnest. It was a time for rituals, prayers, and ceremonies, when people would seek guidance from the divine or communicate with spirits. The moon was believed to have a direct influence on human emotions, often linked with heightened sensitivity, intuition, and creativity. People believed that the moon had the power to stir the subconscious, bringing to the surface hidden desires, fears, and thoughts that had been buried deep within the soul. In this sense, the moon was a mirror of the human experience, reflecting the inner world, the soul's deepest truths, and the mysteries of existence. The interplay between the sun and moon was not just a matter of opposites, it was a constant cycle of creation and destruction, of movement between light and dark, life and death. The sun's rise marked the birth of a new day, while its setting symbolized the approach of night, a time for rest, reflection, and renewal. In the same way, the moon's waxing and waning mirrored the human journey, from moments of clarity and growth to times of uncertainty and introspection. The sun and moon, in their constant cycle, were reminders that life itself was cyclical, marked by periods of expansion and contraction, of activity and rest. Just as the sun and moon could not exist without each other, so too did the human soul need both light and dark, action and reflection, in order to live a full and balanced life. This understanding of the cyclical nature of existence was central to the spiritual beliefs of many ancient cultures. Life was not seen as a linear progression, but as a continuous cycle, marked by periods of growth, death, and rebirth. The sun and moon were the archetypes of this cycle, representing the forces of life that were constantly in motion. In the Egyptian tradition, the daily cycle of Ra's journey across the sky mirrored the soul's journey through life and the afterlife. Similarly, in the mythologies of many cultures, the death and rebirth of the sun were seen as symbolic of the soul's passage through death and resurrection. The death of the sun at sunset was not the end, but the beginning of a new cycle, just as death was not the finality of life, but a transition to something new and unknown. For early humans, the sun and moon were not merely objects of awe, they were guides to understanding the mysteries of life and death. The movement of these celestial bodies reflected the larger forces at play in the universe, the balance of light and darkness, of creation and destruction, of birth and death. These forces were not in opposition to each other, but complementary, creating a dynamic harmony that was essential to the fabric of existence. The sun and moon, as symbols of these cosmic forces, provided a framework for understanding the human condition. Just as the sun gave light to the earth and the moon reflected its glow, so too did humans reflect the light of the divine and face the darkness of their own inner lives. The sun and moon also offered early humans a way to measure and navigate time. The predictable rise and set of the sun provided a natural rhythm by which people could organize their lives. The solar cycle, with its regular movement from day to night, was the foundation of the daily schedule, marking the hours of work, rest, and activity. The lunar cycle, with its monthly phases, was used to track the passage of months and seasons, marking the changing rhythms of nature. This understanding of time was not just practical but spiritual, for the passage of time was seen as a reflection of the larger cycles of life. The sun and moon provided a way for early humans to align themselves with the natural order, to synchronize their lives with the rhythms of the universe. In many cultures, the sun and moon were not just cosmic forces but powerful deities that governed both the natural world and the fate of humanity. These deities were believed to have a direct influence on human affairs, shaping the destinies of individuals and civilizations alike. The sun god Ra, for example, was seen as the ruler of the heavens and the force that maintained cosmic order. Similarly, the moon goddess Selene was revered as a powerful protector and guide, whose light illuminated the darkness and helped people navigate the unseen realms. These gods and goddesses were believed to hold the power of life and death, creation and destruction, and were often invoked in times of crisis or need. The worship of the sun and moon was a way for ancient people to understand and honor the forces that governed the world. Through rituals, prayers, and sacrifices, people sought to align themselves with the cosmic forces of the sun and moon, hoping to gain favor and protection from the gods. In many cultures, the sun and moon were seen as the sources of all life, and their favor was essential for prosperity, health, and survival. The sun's warmth was associated with fertility and abundance, while the moon's light was linked with intuition, protection, and spiritual insight. The sun and moon were not just celestial bodies, but powerful symbols of the forces that shaped human existence, guiding people through the cycles of life and death, growth and decay. As human societies advanced, the influence of the sun and moon extended beyond the realm of mythology and religion. These celestial bodies became central to the development of early astronomy, as people sought to understand their movements and patterns in greater detail. The study of the stars, the sun, and the moon became a way to unlock the secrets of the universe, and early astronomers sought to track and predict the movements of these bodies with increasing accuracy. This pursuit of knowledge was not just about science, it was also about understanding the deeper meaning behind the celestial movements, about finding a connection between the physical and the spiritual. In the end, the sun and moon were not just distant, impersonal objects in the sky, they were symbols of life, death, and renewal, powerful forces that shaped both the natural world and the human soul. The interplay between these celestial bodies provided a framework for understanding the eternal cycles of existence, from birth to death and back again. The sun and moon, with their complementary roles, represented the balance of opposites that underpinned the universe, and their constant cycles reminded early humans that life, like the cosmos, was always in motion, always moving from light to darkness, from growth to decay, and back to light once more. From the earliest days of human history, the night sky has served as both a map and a mirror. It was more than a backdrop for human activity, it was an essential part of the cosmic drama in which humanity played a central role. The stars, planets, and the sun and moon were seen not just as celestial objects but as markers of divine presence, tools for navigation, and symbols of a greater order. The movements of the heavens were not random or indifferent, they were thought to be orchestrated by unseen cosmic forces that shaped not only the natural world but the very lives of those who lived beneath the stars. This profound relationship between the celestial and terrestrial worlds formed the foundation of many ancient belief systems, where the sky was not just a physical space but a spiritual realm, a place where humanity's destiny was written. In the earliest societies, the night sky was a realm that demanded reverence. It was a source of mystery, wonder, and power, as well as a guide to understanding the rhythm of life. For early humans, who lived closely with the earth and its cycles, the sky was both a practical and spiritual tool. The patterns of the sun's movement governed their days, and the phases of the moon marked the passage of months. Yet, the stars, constellations that glittered in the vast darkness, held a different kind of power. They were not bound by the same cyclical nature as the sun and moon, yet they provided a sense of continuity, a fixed point in a world of constant change. The stars were the ancestors, the gods, and the guides, providing a framework through which humans could orient themselves in the vastness of the world. One of the most significant aspects of early human civilization was its ability to track and understand the stars. While the sun's path provided the framework for daily life and the moon's phases tracked the passage of months, the stars offered a different kind of knowledge. They were not bound by the same cycles, but instead, they provided a way to measure time on a longer scale, to understand the passage of years and seasons. The constellations were used by ancient peoples for everything from agricultural planning to navigation. The stars served as markers, guiding people across deserts, seas, and plains. The constellations, with their fixed patterns, were maps, guides to the unseen realms beyond the horizon, both in the physical world and in the spiritual dimensions that ancient people believed existed. In many ancient cultures, the stars were intimately connected to mythology and religious beliefs. The constellations were not just patterns of light, they were stories told in the night sky, with each star representing a figure, a god, or a mythological event. In ancient Greece, for example, the constellations were deeply tied to the myths of the gods and heroes. The stars were not seen as distant points of light but as active participants in the cosmic drama. The Greek myth of Orion, the mighty hunter, was written in the stars, with the constellation of Orion marking the place where the hunter had been immortalized. Similarly, in other cultures, the stars were seen as representations of important figures, heroes, gods, and ancestors, whose stories were told through the arrangement of the stars. The idea that the stars were connected to the divine was widespread across ancient cultures. In Mesopotamia, the stars were believed to be the eyes of the gods, watching over humanity and influencing the course of events. The Babylonians, for example, developed an intricate system of astrology, linking the movement of the stars and planets to the fate of individuals and nations. The ancient Egyptians, too, saw the stars as intimately connected to the divine order. The star Sirius, for instance, was seen as the harbinger of the Nile's flooding, a phenomenon that was vital to the fertility of the land. The rise of Sirius was linked to the rebirth of the earth, symbolizing the cosmic order that governed the world. The connection between the stars and divine influence also extended to the movement of the planets. The planets, in many cultures, were seen not as mere celestial bodies but as agents of divine will, whose movements could be interpreted to reveal the future. The Greeks, Romans, and Egyptians all had elaborate systems of astrology, in which the movements of the planets were seen as messages from the gods, revealing the fates of individuals, cities, and nations. Astrology was not just a means of predicting personal fortunes, it was a way to understand the greater cosmic order. The movements of the stars and planets were thought to reflect the larger cycles of the universe: birth, growth, decay, and renewal. In addition to their spiritual significance, the stars and planets were also practical tools. Early humans were able to navigate vast distances using the stars, especially those cultures that lived near the sea or in open plains. The stars were guides, leading travelers across the deserts of Arabia or the Mediterranean Sea. The North Star, for example, has been a beacon for travelers for millennia, its fixed position in the sky providing a reliable point of reference. Sailors, traders, and nomadic peoples all relied on the stars to find their way, using constellations to orient themselves during the night and plan their journeys. The stars were not just points of light in the sky, they were a language of navigation, allowing people to chart courses across vast and often unforgiving landscapes. The connection between the stars and practical knowledge extended to agriculture as well. Early agricultural societies used the stars to time their planting and harvesting cycles. In many cultures, the appearance of certain stars in the sky marked the beginning of the growing season, signaling the right time to plant crops. In ancient Egypt, for example, the heliacal rising of the star Sirius marked the flooding of the Nile River, which brought nutrient-rich soil to the land, allowing crops to grow. The connection between the stars and the agricultural cycle was seen as a divine blessing, with the gods ensuring that the earth would continue to yield sustenance for those who lived on it. But beyond their practical uses, the stars held a deeper, more mysterious significance. They were symbols of eternity, of the endless cycles of creation and destruction that governed the cosmos. The stars, with their distant and unchanging light, were reminders that the world was part of a larger, eternal order. They were a link between humanity and the divine, a connection to the infinite. To gaze at the stars was to look into the vastness of time and space, to ponder humanity's place in the universe, and to reflect on the mysteries of life and death. The stars were not just distant objects, they were a part of the eternal dance that connected all things: life and death, light and darkness, creation and destruction. The ancient understanding of the stars was not simply based on physical observation but on a deeper, symbolic connection. The stars were seen as reflections of the divine will, and their movements were thought to influence the course of human events. Whether it was the rising of Sirius in Egypt or the constellations in Greece, the stars were seen as guiding forces that provided meaning to human existence. They were not just distant points of light, they were the breath of the gods, the fingers of fate, shaping the destiny of the world. The constellations, with their fixed patterns, offered a sense of continuity and order in a world that could often seem chaotic and uncertain. They were the constant, the eternal presence in the sky, offering a sense of stability and guidance. In many cultures, the stars were used to mark the passage of time, to structure rituals, and to create calendars that governed religious ceremonies, agricultural activities, and even personal milestones. The stars were a way to bring order to the passage of time, to align human activity with the rhythms of the universe. Over time, as human societies became more advanced and scientific knowledge expanded, the stars were studied not just for their spiritual or practical significance but for their physical properties as well. The development of astronomy allowed humans to understand the stars in a new way, not just as symbols of divine will but as physical objects with their own characteristics and life cycles. Yet, even with the rise of science, the stars continued to hold a special place in the human imagination, retaining their mystique as symbols of the eternal and the divine. In the end, the stars served as both a guide and a mystery. They were tools for navigation, markers of time, and symbols of the divine, all while offering a sense of connection to something larger than oneself. As human beings gazed at the stars, they saw not just points of light, but reflections of their own lives, interconnected with the cosmos, bound by the same cycles of birth, life, death, and rebirth. The stars were a reminder that humanity was part of a larger, grander story, a story written in the sky, guiding all who sought to understand the mysteries of existence. As human civilizations developed and evolved, their understanding of the celestial world transformed from a source of awe and mystery into a tool for practical guidance, deeper philosophical reflection, and spiritual exploration. The skies above, once a chaotic and enigmatic expanse, gradually became a structured, organized system. This shift in perception not only shaped ancient cultures' ability to navigate the physical world, but it also influenced their conceptualization of the cosmos and their place within it. The idea that the heavens were directly linked to the fate and destiny of human beings emerged with striking clarity across many ancient societies, each interpreting the motions of the sun, moon, and stars as reflections of larger universal truths. These celestial bodies were not passive, they were active participants in a cosmic drama, influencing the lives of mortals in ways that were as profound as they were mysterious. Early humans were not content to simply observe the stars, moon, and sun. They sought to understand them, to imbue them with meaning and purpose. The study of the heavens became a central feature of religious, spiritual, and philosophical life. Civilizations such as the Sumerians, Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, and Mayans began to chart the movements of the stars and planets, creating elaborate systems of calendars, horoscopes, and cosmologies. The importance of these celestial bodies was reflected in the prominence they held within mythologies and religious texts, where gods, heroes, and supernatural beings were often depicted as living in the heavens or influencing the world from above. The sky became a map to the divine, and the movements of celestial bodies were seen as the divine's way of communicating with humanity. One of the central features of ancient cosmology was the belief that the movements of the sun and moon were closely tied to the cycles of life and death. The sun, in particular, symbolized the forces of life, creation, and renewal. Its daily journey across the sky, from the moment it rose in the east to the moment it set in the west, was seen as a mirror to the human journey from birth to death. The setting sun represented the end of one cycle, but it also foreshadowed the beginning of the next, just as night, though a time of darkness and rest, was also a precursor to the return of the light. This cyclical pattern was deeply embedded in the mythology of many cultures, reinforcing the idea that life itself was a constant, repetitive process, filled with moments of growth, decay, and rebirth. For example, in ancient Egyptian mythology, the sun god Ra was the ultimate symbol of life, order, and creation. Ra's daily journey through the sky was more than just a natural event, it was the cosmic order in action. As the sun rose each morning, Ra was reborn, and as it set, he was swallowed by the primordial sea of chaos, only to be reborn again at dawn. The journey of Ra reflected the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. It was an endless cycle that mirrored the cycle of human existence, offering a divine blueprint for understanding the ebb and flow of life. The moon, with its subtle light and ever-changing phases, represented the more mysterious and transient aspects of existence. Where the sun was constant, predictable, and outward, the moon was enigmatic, waxing and waning, reflecting the hidden, cyclical nature of life. Its phases were deeply symbolic in many cultures, representing the changing tides of human emotions, growth, and transformation. The moon's ability to reflect the sun's light was seen as a metaphor for the human soul, which was thought to reflect the divine light. Just as the moon's phases moved from darkness to fullness and back again, so too did the human soul journey through periods of light and darkness, growth and loss. In the cultures of the ancient Near East, the moon was often associated with the goddess and feminine energy. The lunar cycle, with its association with the tides, was also connected to the cycles of birth and fertility. The moon's phases mirrored the growth and decline of life itself. The waxing moon symbolized birth, growth, and new beginnings, while the waning moon symbolized the process of aging, decline, and death. This cycle reflected not just the physical changes of the natural world but also the psychological and spiritual cycles that individuals underwent throughout their lives. But the symbolism of the sun and moon was not limited to merely representing the cycles of life and death, it also had profound implications for how human beings understood their relationship to the cosmos. In many cultures, the sun and moon were thought to be forces of balance, embodying the dualities of existence. The sun represented the active, outward force, order, light, reason, and clarity. It was the masculine energy, the yang in the ancient Chinese cosmological system. The moon, on the other hand, represented the passive, inward force, emotion, intuition, mystery, and change. It was the feminine energy, the yin. Together, these forces created a harmonious balance, one that reflected the complementary nature of life itself. This understanding of cosmic balance was central to the way many ancient societies saw the universe. It was not a place of chaos or random events, but one of order and symmetry, where each force played a crucial role in maintaining harmony. In the cosmic dance between the sun and moon, the stars, and the planets, each celestial body had its place, just as each human being had their own role in the grand scheme of life. The belief that the heavens were in balance had profound implications for the way people viewed their own lives and their relationship to the universe. The celestial bodies were not distant and indifferent, they were intimately connected to the lives of humans, guiding them, influencing them, and offering them a sense of purpose and meaning. The early astronomers and astrologers who studied these celestial bodies often saw themselves as mediators between the divine and the human world. They believed that by understanding the movements of the heavens, they could unlock the mysteries of life and death, and provide guidance to rulers and individuals alike. Astrology, for instance, was seen not as a mere prediction of future events but as a way of understanding the deeper currents of existence. The position of the planets and stars at the time of a person's birth was thought to influence their destiny, shaping not just their fate but also their character and life's purpose. In this sense, astrology was not simply a system of fortune-telling, it was a spiritual and philosophical system that tied the individual to the cosmos, linking personal experience to the universal. The deep connection between the celestial and the terrestrial was not limited to religious or philosophical ideas, it also had practical implications. The ancient world was shaped by the movements of the heavens, and the ability to track these movements was a vital skill for survival. The positioning of the stars and planets helped ancient societies navigate the seas, determine the best times for planting and harvesting crops, and even decide when to wage war or make peace. In cultures such as the ancient Egyptians, the Babylonians, and the Mayans, astronomy was a highly developed science that was deeply intertwined with the fabric of daily life. In the ancient world, knowledge of the heavens was not something reserved for the few. It was a collective understanding that was shared by entire societies. The great temples and pyramids were often aligned with the stars, and many ancient structures were designed to capture the movements of celestial bodies at specific times of the year. The most famous example of this is the Great Pyramid of Giza, which was aligned with the stars in such a way that it served as a cosmic calendar, marking the passage of time and connecting the earth to the heavens. In this way, the celestial bodies were not just observed, they were integrated into the very fabric of life. As human societies evolved and became more complex, the understanding of the celestial world became more sophisticated. The development of more advanced tools, such as the astrolabe and the sextant, allowed astronomers to map the stars with greater accuracy. With the advent of the telescope, the universe expanded dramatically, revealing new galaxies, stars, and planets. Yet, even with this expanded knowledge, the symbolic power of the sun, moon, and stars did not diminish. These celestial bodies continued to serve as metaphors for human existence, guiding individuals on their personal journeys and offering a deeper understanding of the mysteries of life. In the modern world, we have largely separated ourselves from the stars. We no longer rely on them to navigate our lives or our societies in the way that our ancestors did. The advances in technology, astronomy, and science have made the mysteries of the cosmos more comprehensible and more distant. But despite our growing knowledge of the physical universe, the sun, moon, and stars continue to hold deep significance in our collective imagination. They still serve as powerful symbols of life, death, and the eternal cycle of existence. Even in an age dominated by reason and science, we continue to look up at the night sky, searching for meaning, for connection, and for a reminder of our place in the vast and mysterious universe.